All right, get ready for this one because today we're doing a deep dive on something a little bit unexpected. Um, yeah, nipple orgasms.
Wow.
I know, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I bet you're probably thinking, hold on, is
Sure.
that even like a real thing?
Yeah, exactly. I
Kind of.
mean,
Well,
is that a thing?
let's find out. We've got this Healthline article. It's called How to Have a Nipple Orgasm.
Mm.
They say they have 23 tips for you and your partner.
Yeah.
So I'm already kind of intrigued. I mean, I've always thought of orgasms as being, focused on, well, the genitals.
Right. Yeah. Most people think that, but actually, nipple orgasms, those are a real thing.
Oh, okay.
And they're possible for all genders, not just women.
Really?
Yeah. And the science behind it is actually really fascinating. You see, your nipples have hundreds of nerve endings.
Okay.
And get this, they connect directly to the genital sensory cortex in your brain.
Wait, hold on. You're saying the same part of the brain that, lights up during other activities also reacts to nipple stimulation.
Verily, that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah, so that genital sensory cortex, it's like the brain's central hub for processing those kinds of pleasurable sensations. So when you think about it, it makes sense that nipple stimulation can be so powerful and even lead to a full-blown orgasm for some people.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it does make a lot of sense when you consider, like, how sensitive nipples can be.
Right.
I mean, everyone knows that.
And there's research, actual research to back this up.
Mm.
The article, it even cites a study called Novel Topical Formulation Applied to the Nipple Areola Complex Improves Female Orgasm. So this isn't just some anecdotal thing, This is science.
That's really interesting. But, okay, does that mean everyone can have a nipple orgasm?
Mm.
Or is it kind of a hit or miss situation?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, like most things related to pleasure, experiences definitely vary. I mean, think about it. What works for one person might not work for another, right?
Right, yeah.
But the potential is definitely there, and I think that's what makes this topic so interesting.
So, for someone who's like me and has never even thought about this possibility, how would you describe what a nipple orgasm actually feels like?
Oh, well, the article uses this great phrase. They say it's like something that sneaks up on you and then explodes out of nowhere
Whoa.
with waves of pleasure spreading through the body.
Wow, that sounds intense. So is it like a sudden rush or is it more of a gradual buildup?
Well, it's actually more of a gradual buildup, which makes sense when you think back to how those nerve endings work.
Right.
As the stimulation continues, the signals, they just keep firing to the brain, eventually leading to that peak of pleasure.
Okay, this is all very theoretical. Now, I'm really curious to learn about, like, the practical side of all this. Like, what kind of techniques can you actually use to get to that point?
So the article breaks it down into two main categories.
Okay.
There's solo play and then there's partnered play.
All right, well, let's start with solo play. What are some things someone could try, on their own?
It all starts with setting the right mood,
Oh.
You want to create a space where you feel comfortable, relaxed. Maybe dim the lights, light some candles, put on some music that gets you in the mood, It's all about setting the stage.
Makes sense. You don't want to be distracted by, your to-do list or anything.
Exactly. And then, focus on your breath. Take those nice deep breaths, inhales and exhales to help you really kind of get out of your head and into your body.
Okay. So we're relaxed. We're in the mood. We're breathing deeply. What's next?
From there, the article suggests starting with some gentle exploration. You could, begin by stroking your belly, then move up to your rib cage, and finally, circle around your breasts. It's like a slow, teasing kind of buildup.
I like that idea. Kind of easing into the main event,
Right, exactly. And then when you're ready to, really focus on your nipples, you can start with a light touch. Circling your breasts and areola with large strokes, maybe even easing into a gentle breast massage.
That sounds super relaxing already.
Yeah, and the key here is to pay attention to what feels good for you. I mean, some people might prefer a firmer touch, while others might like something softer and more delicate.
Right.
It's all about, experimenting, discovering what you like.
Yeah, finding what works for you.
Exactly.
Okay, so once you've kind of warmed things up a bit, what are some techniques that can really, take things to the next level?
This is where it gets really interesting. The article talks about techniques like pinching, twisting, and pulling.
Wait, really?
All of which can create those intense bursts of sensation.
Hold on. How do those techniques actually work? Is it just about the physical feeling or is there more to it?
Well, it actually all ties back to those nerve endings we were talking about.
Okay.
You see, when you apply pressure or create friction on the nipples, you're basically stimulating those nerve endings even more. sending a stronger signal to the brain.
So it's like turning up the volume on those pleasure signals.
Exactly. And they also talk about bringing yourself almost to the edge of orgasm and then pulling back.
Oh, wow.
And then repeating that, this kind of teasing, that build up and release, it can create some really incredible waves of pleasure.
Okay. I mean, that's a lot to take in. For someone who's, really intrigued by all this, where would you recommend they start?
Well, the most important thing is to approach this with a sense of curiosity and playfulness.
Yeah.
Don't put too much pressure on yourself to achieve a specific outcome, okay? Just focus on exploring your body and discovering what feels good.
I like that. No pressure, just
Yeah.
exploration.
Exactly.
Okay, speaking of exploration, I'm actually really curious to hear about the partnered play aspect of this.
Yeah.
What does the article suggest for couples who want to, explore this together?
So before we dive into like specific techniques, I think it's really important to emphasize the role of communication.
Okay.
And this applies to any kind of intimate activity, but it's especially important when you're exploring something new like this.
Right, so you're saying that open communication is key to making sure that everyone feels comfortable and enjoys the experience.
Exactly.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's about creating that space where both partners can express their desires, their boundaries openly and honestly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So assuming that open communication is already there, in place, what kind of partnered play techniques does the article recommend?
Well, they cover a wide range, starting with something as simple as hot breath.
Okay.
Imagine like your partner gently blowing warm air onto your nipples, slowly circling closer and closer.
Mm.
That contrast between the warm breath and the cool air, it can create a really delightful tingling sensation.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see how that would feel good. What are some other techniques they suggest?
They also talk about licking, sucking, and even nibbling.
Wait, nibbling? I guess I can see how that could be pleasurable, but isn't that kind of intense?
It can be,
Yeah.
and that's why communication is so crucial, right? It's about finding what both partners are comfortable with, making sure everyone's on the same page.
Right, because pleasure shouldn't come at the expense of someone's, comfort or boundaries.
Right.
So with all these techniques, is there a right way to approach it, or is it all about experimentation?
Experimentation is definitely key.
Okay.
And it's not just about the physical techniques, but also about the mental and emotional aspects of nipple play, which we'll get into more in part 2 of this deep dive.
Okay, I'm already hooked.
Right.
Okay, so we talked about the science and explored a bunch of different techniques, but now I'm kind of curious about the mental and emotional side of all of this. Like, what's the connection there?
Well, it's like when you think about it, our sexual experiences, they aren't just about, just the physical sensations.
Right.
Our thoughts and our emotions, even the whole context, they play a huge part in how we actually experience pleasure.
So you're saying, like, there's this whole psychological thing going on that we need to kind of consider here.
Absolutely. And one of the most powerful tools we have for actually making things more pleasurable is our own imagination.
Okay.
And the article actually touches on this a bit when they're talking about using fantasies, during solo play.
Okay, so how can someone actually incorporate fantasies into nipple play? Like, what does that even look like?
It's about finding what works for you.
Right.
Some people, they might find it helpful to actually visualize specific scenarios,
Okay.
like maybe a romantic encounter or a playful scene or even something, more adventurous, whatever kind of gets you going.
Yeah, it's like creating your own little mental movie to go along with those physical sensations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then for others, it might be more about letting go of those specific visuals and just focusing on the sensations themselves and just kind of letting your mind wander and create its own little story.
Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a lot of room for creativity here, right?
For sure. There definitely is. And, when we talk about partnered play, those mental and emotional aspects, they become even more important, right?
Because now you're dealing with not just your own, headspace, but also your partner's.
Right. Exactly. And
Right.
that's why, we keep coming back to this, but that's why that open communication is just so crucial.
So, beyond just talking about what feels good,
Yeah.
physically, what are some other ways that couples can kind of incorporate those mental and emotional aspects into, what they're doing?
One way is to talk about your fantasies.
Okay.
Actually share those, because sharing those intimate thoughts and desires, what that does.
Yeah.
It can actually create a deeper sense of connection and intimacy.
It's like you're inviting your partner into, your own little world.
Exactly.
Which can be, really bonding.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything super elaborate. It
Right.
could be as simple as just sharing, a fleeting thought or describing a scenario that just turns you on.
Yeah. And what about like during the actual play itself? Are there things you can do like in those moments to kind of enhance the mental and emotional connection?
One really powerful technique is to practice mindfulness.
Ah,
Instead of just like going through the motions, try to really tune in to the sensations that you're feeling right then and there.
so it's about like being present in your body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Notice those subtle changes in temperature, in pressure, and texture. Just really be there with it.
So it's almost like a form of meditation in a way.
It does have some similarities. And,
Yeah.
just like with meditation, it might take a little practice to like get comfortable with it.
Sure.
But the more you practice, the more you become aware of, your body's signals.
And what about those moments, like the anticipation and the buildup?
Yeah.
How can couples kind of play with those, like mentally and emotionally?
Well, this is where communication is like key again, you know? You can actually use words to like express desire, to tease, to like tantalize your partner, to really build that anticipation before you even touch them.
So it's almost like creating like a verbal foreplay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And don't underestimate the power of just saying that you're enjoying something. Like actually telling your partner what feels good can be incredibly arousing for both of you.
It's like you're creating this like positive feedback list.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And, as you kind of keep exploring and experimenting with these mental and emotional aspects, you might just be surprised at, how deep and how intense the pleasure can actually be.
So you're saying like by tapping into these psychological and emotional elements, we can actually like make the physical sensations themselves even better.
Absolutely. The mind and body are super connected.
Hmm.
And when we bring awareness and intention to our sexual experiences, we can actually unlock like whole new levels of pleasure and intimacy.
Wow, this has been so eye-opening.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just starting to understand how much more there is to nipple play than, just like the physical stuff we talked about.
Yeah, and we've really only scratched the surface here.
Precisely.
There's a whole world out there,
Oh,
a
yeah.
whole world of pleasure and self-discovery.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about, that's for sure. And I'm excited to, keep exploring these ideas and see where they lead.
That's the spirit. And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. So have fun, be curious, and most importantly, be kind to yourself.
Well said.
Yeah.
Wow, that last conversation about like the mental and emotional side of nipple play, it's really got me thinking. It's amazing, how much our thoughts and feelings can actually like change how those physical sensations feel.
It really shows you, right, how connected our minds and bodies are, especially when we're talking about pleasure.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into nipple orgasms,
Yeah.
what are some like key takeaways for our listeners to remember as they, start exploring this for themselves?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that pleasure is individual, right?
Yeah.
What works for one person might not work for someone else, and that's totally fine. There's no like right way or wrong way to experience this.
So it's all about, like we said, just finding what feels good for you and, going with that.
Exactly. And that might take some experimenting.
Right.
Don't be afraid to try different techniques, both on your own and with a partner, and just see what really works for you.
So what about, we talked about the mental and emotional side of things. What are some like practical tips for bringing those elements into it?
One thing that we touched on earlier was mindfulness, like really being present in your body,
Yeah.
noticing the sensations without like judging yourself. That can make a huge difference.
So instead of getting like, stuck in our thoughts, we should try to focus more on what we're actually feeling, in that moment.
Exactly. And that might mean slowing down, paying attention to your breath, just really tuning in to all those subtle little things you're feeling.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's almost like it's kind of like a form of meditation in a way.
It is. Yeah, it is.
And, just like with meditation, it might take some practice to feel comfortable with it.
Sure.
But the more you practice, the more you become aware of like all your body signals.
And what about, we were talking about fantasy, right? Bringing fantasy into nipple play. How can that kind of like enhance the whole experience?
Well, like we said, our imaginations are so powerful, especially when it comes to arousal and pleasure.
Hmm.
So whether you're exploring alone or with a partner, tapping into those fantasies can make it way more immersive and exciting.
So, for instance, like if someone's really into the idea of, being adored or worshipped, they could like bring that into their fantasy while they're, doing this.
Exactly. For others, it might be about exploring, a sense of power or even dominance. Or maybe it's about recreating a specific scene that they find really hot.
It sounds like there's just like endless
Oh,
possibility.
there totally are.
Yeah.
And the best part is you're in control, right?
Right.
You get to choose the story, the characters, where it takes place. It's all you.
Okay, so for couples who are doing this together, what are some tips for making sure it's like a safe and pleasurable experience for both people?
Well, we've talked a lot about communication, which is really important, like always when you're intimate with someone. But I think it's extra important when it comes to nipple play, just because it's an area that can be, very sensitive for a lot of people.
Right. So beyond just saying like yes or no, are there ways that couples can like, really communicate what they want and what the
Okay.
boundaries are?
Definitely. You could talk about like specific techniques you want to try,
Okay.
maybe share a fantasy you've been thinking about.
Yeah.
And it also means setting clear boundaries about what's okay and what's not okay.
So it's all about like creating that space where both people feel heard and respected.
Exactly. And that might mean checking in with each other as you go, like, how does this feel? Or is there anything you'd like me to do differently?
So being in tune with each other, right?
Yeah. Building that trust.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you have that foundation, it opens up so much more.
This has been a fascinating conversation. It
Yeah.
feels like we've only just, you know, skimmed the surface here.
Oh, there's always more to learn.
Right.
When it comes to pleasure and sexuality, that's what keeps it interesting.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they, go off on their own little adventure?
Just this. Be curious, be playful, and be kind to yourself.
Okay.
There's no need to rush, no pressure to achieve anything. Just enjoy the process of figuring out what feels good.
That's great advice. And on that note, we want to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the world of nipple orgasms. We hope you learned something new and that you feel, empowered to keep exploring your own pleasure.